What if the biggest thing you believe about Hindus and Muslims isn't completely true? What if history didn't just divide them, but also brought them together? Because for centuries, they didn't just coexist. They fought side by side. They ruled together. They built entire civilizations together. And yet, that part of history is rarely talked about. So the real question is, why do we mostly remember the conflicts and overlook the cooperation? When we hear history, what do we usually hear? Clashes, battles, invasions, conflict, division. These are the loud parts of history. But history is not only made in war, it is also made in cooperation, in alliances, in shared lives. And when we look closely, we find something more complex. Hindus and Muslims didn't just live side by side, they influenced each other's worlds, sometimes in conflict, but often in collaboration. Take the Mughal Empire. Under rulers like Akbar, governance included people from multiple religious backgrounds. Hindu generals commanded armies. Hindu ministers advised the emperor. This wasn't symbolic. It was part of how the empire functioned. But history didn't stay the same under every ruler. Under Aurangzeb, policies became more rigid, and tensions increased in certain regions. Historians continue to debate the full impact of his rule. At the same time, the reality was not one-dimensional. There are historical records indicating that some Hindu temples received patronage or protection during his reign. Hindus also served in administrative roles and were part of the broader military structure of the empire, which highlights something important. Even in more controversial periods, the system remained interconnected rather than completely divided. Now here's where it gets interesting. Even the Maratha Empire, often seen in purely religious terms, was more complex. Alliances crossed religious lines. Muslim commanders served in Maratha forces. At the same time, like all political powers of that era, conflicts also existed, because in that world, strategy and survival often mattered more than identity alone. During the Indian Rebellion of 1857, something powerful happened. Hindu and Muslim soldiers fought side by side. They shared resources. They trusted each other in life and death situations. And it wasn't just soldiers. Villagers helped fighters regardless of identity. In that moment, identity often mattered less than resistance and survival. But that's only one part of the story. A few decades later came the Caliphate movement. It began as a Muslim-led cause, but didn't remain limited. Leaders like Mahatma Gandhi supported it, turning it into a broader anti-colonial movement. Hindus and Muslims protested together, boycotted together, organized together. For a moment, it felt like large-scale unity. But history here is layered. Different groups had different motivations, and over time, those differences became more visible. The movement eventually lost momentum, and that unity did not fully sustain, which reveals something important. Unity doesn't mean the absence of differences. It means the ability to work together, sometimes briefly, sometimes for longer periods. And if this sounds surprising, it should. Because most of us were never taught this side of history. But what comes next adds another layer. Cooperation didn't only happen under Muslim rulers. Take the Vijayanagara Empire, a major Hindu kingdom, but its system included Muslims in military roles and trade networks. Now shift to the Marathas. Under Shivaji, Muslim officers served in key positions: naval commanders, artillery experts, administrators. At the same time, like all empires of that period, there were also conflicts with neighboring states, including Muslim-ruled ones, which highlights a key point. History was not simply Hindu versus Muslim. It was alliances, strategy, and shifting power. Beyond empires and politics, the strongest form of cooperation existed in daily life. People shared markets, lived in the same neighborhoods, worked together, languages blended, cultures overlapped. There were tensions at times, But long periods of coexistence were also common, and that everyday normality is what held societies together. If history shows how people live together, cinema shows how they imagine themselves together. Filmmakers like Yash Chopra created stories centered on love, relationships, and human connection, not division. Behind the scenes, artists from different backgrounds collaborated constantly. Cinema became a shared cultural space where people connected beyond identity. Few traditions shared similar ideas: love, devotion, connection. Figures like Kabir challenged rigid divisions. Music, poetry, and language evolved through shared influence. Even Urdu developed through this interaction. Culture didn't erase differences, but it often softened them. So why do we mostly hear about conflict? Because conflict is dramatic. It creates strong, memorable stories. Cooperation is quieter and happens over longer periods. And because of that, it's often overlooked. Over time, complex histories become simplified. Stories of division are easier to tell than stories of nuance. And sometimes, these simplified versions shape how people see each other today, which is why looking at the full picture matters. So maybe the question isn't whether Hindus and Muslims experience conflict, because they did. But that's not the whole story. And this idea didn't end in the past. In modern times, figures like APJ Abdul Kalam became widely respected across communities, known not for identity, but for contribution. His life reflects something history has shown again and again: that respect, collaboration, and shared purpose can exist, even in diverse societies. So the real question is, why do we remember only the divisions and overlook the connections? Because when you look closely, history is not just a story of conflict. It is also a story of coexistence, exchange, and collaboration. And that changes how we understand the past and what's possible in the present.